dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, we are lacing up our boots and continuing our journey across the incredible landscape of Spain. Now, if you think you know Spanish wine, prepare to have your mind completely blown because today we are diving headfirst into Navarra. This isn't just a supporting character on the Iberian Peninsula. We're talking about an ancient, independent kingdom that is home to Europe's only true desert right along the lush alpine mountains, a historic highway where medieval monks literally hand out free wine to weary pilgrims, and a place that is just as famous for its world-class wines as it is for the pristine white asparagus. It is a region of radical contrast, hidden old vine treasures, and a massive wine revolution. So pour yourself a glass of something delicious and let's go explore the breathtaking crossroads of Navarra. Please take a moment of time to subscribe, rate, and review Exploring the Wine Glass. It's completely free and is a great way to let other wine lovers know about the podcast. Be sure to head over to the website exploringthewineglass.com to read my award-winning blog and to see what else I've been up to. And most of all, please tell your friends about the podcast. Slancha.
Every time. Give me the red wine.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Côte d'Aron specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. Today, we are exploring a region that I have had the honor of visiting, one that left a permanent mark on my wine-loving soul. Navarra is one of those wine regions that quietly waits for you to notice it. It sits there just east of Rioja, north of Aragon, stretching from the Pyrenees down to the Ebro River, and somehow it is always described as next to something, and it doesn't get described as itself. But here's the thing. Navarra is not a supporting character. It's a region of dramatic contrast, of mountains and desert-like plains, pilgrims, kings, of Rosado revolutions, Garnacha comebacks, and it's a place that I've had the privilege to visit. So today, we're going to give Navarra its moment. Pour something Spanish if you haven't, and let's get moving. So, location and geography. This is where the mountains meet the Ebro. Let's ground ourselves on the map, because if you don't understand the geography of Navarra, the wines will make absolutely no sense to you. Navarra sits in northern Spain, tucked into a fascinating geopolitical corner. To its west lies the rugged green Basque country. To the southwest is La Rioja, sharing a famous viticultural border. Aragon borders the region to the east, and to the absolute north, France, separated from Spain by the dramatic, jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Pyrenees. This is not a flat, uniform piece of land. Navarra stretches vertically from cool, densely forested mountain terrain all the way down to sun-baked, arid river plains. It's a geographical anomaly. It's almost as if three completely different macroclimates, the Atlantic, the continental, and the Mediterranean, all have a meeting and decided to share one single administrative boundary. Historically and geographically, Navarra is divided into three major cultural climatic zones. But within those broad zones, the wine world officially recognizes 5 distinct subzones. So let's break them down from north to south, because as the elevation drops, the entire personality of the wine changes. The Montana, or the mountain zone, this is up north near the high peaks of the Pyrenees. The elevations climb dramatically. This is a landscape where the air feels crisp, the rainfall is high, and everything is lush, green, and vibrant. Atlantic influences creep in from the Bay of Biscay, bringing cool breezes and frequent mists. Forests of beech and oak replace the open fields of central Spain. Viticulture here is not for the faint of heart. It is challenging. It's a high-risk environment where spring frosts and autumn rains are constant threats. You won't find sprawling industrial vineyard expanses here. Instead, they are more intimate, rugged, hand-tended plots carved out of hillsides. But the struggle pays off in the glass. The high altitude, cool climate preserves a stunning level of natural acidity and freshness in the grapes. In this broad mountain zone, we find our first wine subzone, Baja Montana, or the lower mountain. Don't let the word lower fool you. This subzone is located in the northeastern corner of the appellation, right at the foot of the Pyrenees. Here, the vineyards sit at elevations reaching up to 450 and nearly 600 meters above the sea level. The soils are a mix of clay and limestone, often littered with slate and mountain scree. The climate is heavily dominated by the Atlantic, resulting in a short, cool growing season. Grapes here ripen with agonizing slowness, keeping potential alcohol levels lower and giving birth to wines with incredible aromatics, bright red fruit profiles, and an unmistakable crunchiness. This is the spiritual home of the traditional Navarra Garnacha, historically prized for creating those pale, bright electric rosados and increasingly celebrated for producing pale, perfumed, Pinot-esque red Garnacha that smell like wild strawberries and white pepper. The Zona Media, or the middle zone. As we move south out of the shadow of the high mountains, we enter a landscape of rolling hills, wide valleys, and transitional terrain. This is the Zonal Media, and it is where Navarra's historic heart beats. Here, the harsh Atlantic climate begins to moderate, blending seamlessly with continental influences from the interior plains. Summers are warm and sunny, but the winters remain bitterly cold. The elevations are still significant. We're talking about 400 to 500 meters. The terrain is much more manageable than the rugged north. Vineyards stretch beautifully across massively undulating landscapes framed by ancient medieval stone villages and fortresses perched on hillsides. You feel the history here. The middle zone is split into highly distinct subzones. Val d'Isarbi, located directly north of the Central Plains, Val d'Isarbi is the northernmost subzone for core red wine production, tightly hugging the path of the Camino de Santiago. It is beautiful, green valley bisected by the Argo River, which helps moderate temperatures. The soils are predominantly deep, moisture-retaining clay mixed with chalky limestone. Because it sits right on the boundary line between Atlantic humidity and continental dryness, Val d'Isarbi produces wines of incredible balance. Tempranillo thrives here, developing a soft, plush, elegant structure, while the local Garnacha remains a beautiful, spicy freshness. It's also a phenomenal zone for white grapes, yielding whites with incredible aromatic intensity. Tierra Estella, stepping over to the western side of the middle zone, we find Tierra Estella, which borders the Basque province of Alava. This subzone is a maze of rugged hills and protected valleys, heavily influenced by the Ega River. What makes Tierra Estella legendary is its soil. It is packed with high concentrations of active limestone and chalk. Combined with cool nights and the climate that keeps fungal disease at bay, this subzone is an absolute sweet spot for Navarra's premium white wine movement. Winemakers here are utilizing this unique terroir to craft world-class barrel-fermented Chardonnays. These wines possess a rich, creamy texture from lees stirring, but they are anchored by a laser-sharp, mineral-driven beam of acidity that allows them to age beautifully for years. And now, a word from our sponsor. Love Spanish wine? Or maybe you want to start exploring it? Get ready for a product that's as fun as it is educational. The Exploring Spanish Wine, the Bingo Brains edition, is one-of-a-kind, downloadable PDF that uses a fun game of bingo to help you master the key facts about Spanish wine. It's a relaxed, non-judgmental way to learn about the country's diverse grapes and the regions on your own time. Think of it as a guide where you can sip, learn, and maybe even shout bingo, all for $4. Find all the details and download your copy at exploringthewineglass.com under the Education tab. Slancha. We then hit the Ribera, and then we just go down as we continue south toward the border of La Rioja and Aragon. The hills flatten out, the skies open up, and you enter the Ribera. The change is shocking. In the height of the summer, this landscape can feel almost desert-like. The cool mountain air is completely gone, replaced by intense baking Mediterranean warmth. Lower elevations mean heat accumulation. Sun exposure is relentless. Rainfall drops off significantly, making water management a critical part of the grape grower's daily life. But this heat isn't a drawback. It actually is an asset. This is a land of incredible agricultural abundance. The same intense sun that ripens the grapes also fuels Spain's most famous vegetable gardens. This is where the country's prized white asparagus, artichokes, and sweet piquillo peppers are grown. In the wine world, this massive southern expanse is divided into further two zones. Ribera Alta, which is the upper riverbank, and Ribera Baja, the lower riverbank. One single region, 5 subzones, 3 dramatically different personalities. That geographically diversity is absolutely everything when it comes to the wine of Navarra, giving winemakers an open canvas that very few other places on earth can match. We can't talk wine without talking the geography and the soils and the rivers. If geography gives Navarra its shape, then it's the soils and rivers which give the wines their actual voice. You cannot talk about this region without talking about what is happening beneath the surface, because Navarra's soils are just as radically varied as its climate. We aren't dealing with one uniform blanket of dirt. Instead, the region is a geological patchwork quilt. Depending on where a winemaker plants their vines, those roots might be fighting through ancient mountain limestone, digging deep into heavy river clay, or struggling to find water in fields of sun-baked gravel. To really understand how this foundation impacts what ends up in your glass, we have to look at the 4 primary soil profiles the region has and see exactly how each one forces the vine to behave. First, we're going to talk about the limestone and clay limestone soils. This is what dominates many of the mid-zone vineyards in Val d'Isarbe and Tierra Estella. Limestone is the holy grail for many winemakers. It is highly alkaline, which restricts the vine's vigor, keeping yields naturally low. But more importantly, limestone acts like a giant sponge. It retains water deep underground during the summer months, allowing the vine to sip moisture rather than guzzling it all at once. This constant regulated water supply keeps the vine's plumbing system working smoothly, which preserves that beautiful, vibrant acidity in the grapes. When you taste a Chardonnay from Tierra Estella, that has a distinct chalky laser-focused minerality and crisp finish. You are tasting the influence of the limestone. Next, we're going to talk about, as we move towards the riverbanks, we're going to start hitting the alluvial deposits. These are soils made of silt, sand, and clay that have been washed down from the mountains over millennia. Alluvial soils are highly fertile and excellent at retaining nutrients. In the past, this fertility meant high yields of simple, everyday juice, but not anymore. Modern viticulture uses these soils strategically. The clay components hold on to water, keeping the vines cool in the heat of the afternoon. This is where you get those incredibly plush, juicy, fruit-forward Tempranillos and international red varieties. The clay slows down the ripening process just enough to let the grapes develop deep color and soft velvety tannins without losing their fruit-forward charm. Then we're going to drop down into warmer southern area of the Ribera, where the earth shifts into gravel and sandy soils. This is a completely different world. Sand and gravel offer almost zero nutritional value to the vine, and they drain of water instantly. It sounds like a terrible place to grow anything, but quality wine is magic. It forces the vine's roots to dig incredibly deep, sometimes tens of meters into the earth, searching for the water table. This struggle creates concentration. Gravel acts as a heat reflector. During the blazing summer days in the Ribera Baja, those smooth river stones absorb the heat of the sun. So at night, when the temperature drops, the stones gently radiate that heat back up to the grape clusters, helping them to burn off aggressive green acids and pushes grapes like Garnacha to the state of rich, opulent structural ripeness, giving the wines those beautiful notes of baked plum and dark, sweet spice. Finally, we're going to go up to Baja Montana. You run into rocky slate vein slopes. These are thin, poor soils sitting on steep inclines. Here, the challenge is sheer erosion and drainage. The water runs off the slopes, meaning the vines are constantly under a mild, controlled state of stress. This stress stops the vine from growing leaves and forces it to put all of its energy into ripening the seeds and skins. The result? Small berries, high skin to juice concentration, because the flavor, color, and tannins of the red wine live entirely in those grape skins. These rocky slopes yield garnachas with intense aromatic lift, deep color, and a tight, elegant structural backbone that allows them to age beautifully. But the soil is only half the story. We also have to talk about the water. The lifeblood of Navarra is its intricate network of rivers. The mighty Ebro River cuts right along the southern boundary of the region, and historically, it is the reason agriculture exists here at all. It carved out the wide valleys and deposits the rich soils that feed the region's famous vegetable gardens. But as you move north, the Ebro splinters into three major tributaries that weave like veins through the Dio: the Aragon, the Arga, and the Egra rivers. These rivers do so much more than just provide irrigation in a place that can get dangerously dry. They act as massive climate moderators. Rivers are natural thermal engines. They chilly spring, the moving water keeps their air circulating, protecting the delicate morning buds from the devastating vineyard frosts. In the dead of summer, the river valleys act as air conditioning ducts, funneling cool mountain breezes down from the Pyrenees into the baked plains. And now, a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website www.dracaenawines.com or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories. Navarra's geography and geology aren't subtle or passive. They are assertive, dynamic, and constantly changing from one vineyard to the next. And when you pour a glass of Navarra wine, the vines are responding directly to the unique combination of stone, soil, and water. If you want to understand the true genius of Navarra, you have to look at the sky. Navarra is climatically complicated, and in the wine world, that is the ultimate compliment. This isn't a region where a winemaker can just look out the window, see a sunny day, and know exactly what the entire province is experiencing. Navigating this region means understanding a brilliant, chaotic collision of weather systems. It is one of few places on the planet where three completely distinct microclimates, Atlantic, continental, and Mediterranean, don't just exist by side, they actively shake hands, clash, and bleed into one another. This creates a dramatic north to south climatic gradient that completely dictates how grapes grow, how they ripen, and how they taste. In the Atlantic dominated zones, the subzones like Baja Montana and the northern edges of Val d'Isarbe, here the weather is governed by the Bay of Biscay. The air is damp, the clouds hang low, and rainfall is high, often exceeding 600 to 700 milliliters a year. The summers here are mild and fleeting, while the winters are long, wet, and thoroughly gray. As you drive south, crossing over the rolling hills of the Zona Media, the ocean's grip begins to slip, and you slam into the continental climate. This is the climate of extremes. Without the moderating influence of the sea, the land behaves like a thermal roller coaster. The summers are intensely hot and dry, while the winters are brutally, bone-chillingly cold. Finally, as you drop into the southern expanses of the Ribera, the continental traits give way to the dominant Mediterranean warmth. Here, the proximity to the Ebro River Valley funnels warm air up the Mediterranean Sea. The skies open up into a brilliant, endless blue. Rainfall plummets, sometimes dropping to a semi arid 350 milliliters a year, and the sun exposure is relentless. What makes this climactic spectrum truly fascinating is how it alters the DNA of a single grape variety. Take Garnacha, absolutely the champion of the region. Garnacha is a total mirror for the microclimate. If you plant Garnacha down south in the Mediterranean heat of the Ribera Baja, it behaves like a hedonist. It turns out dark, muscular, and incredibly generous. Packs a punch of ripe black plums, dark cherries, licorice, and rich, warming mouthfeel that feels like velvet. Take that same grape and plant it just an hour's drive north up in the high elevation Atlantic chilled vineyards of the Baja Montana, and the transformation is incredible. Suddenly, this same grape produces a wine that is pale ruby, translucent, and incredibly light on its feet. Instead of those heavy black fruit, it bursts with high toned red raspberries, wild strawberries, orange peel, and a distinct peppery herbal lift. Navarra doesn't have one single easily summarized climactic identity. It doesn't fit neatly into a box. It has a vast living spectrum. And for the curious wine drinker, that means you can open 3 different bottles of Navarra wine from the exact same grape, from the exact same vintage, and experience 3 entirely different weather patterns captured in liquid form. Now, let's step away from the dirt and weather for a moment and talk about something that deeply shapes the cultural soul of Navarra, the Camino de Santiago. If you want to understand why Navarra's wine culture is so open, so experimental, and so deeply intertwined with European history, you have to look at the footprints left across its landscape. The Camino Francés, the French way, which is the most famous and traveled of all the medieval pilgrimage routes to Santiago de Compostela, enters Spain directly through the jagged peaks of the Pyrenees at the pass of Roncesvalles. From that high mountain entry, the trail winds its way down into the valleys, passes right through the heart of Pamplona, and cuts a definitive path westward across the top of Navarra wine region. For over thousands of years, millions of pilgrims every corner of Europe have walked this exact dirt. And when you look back at the history of the Camino, wine was not viewed as a luxury or a Sunday afternoon indulgence. Wine was fuel. It was absolute nourishment. It was hydration. And most importantly, it was the ultimate symbol of hospitality. Let's go back to the grapes. If you walked into a wine shop 20 years ago and asked for a bottle from Navarra, the clerk would have handed you a neon pink, fruit forward Rosado without a second thought. For a long time, that was the region's entire entity. That place that makes inexpensive rosé. But today, the varietal landscape of Navarra is a stunning masterclass in diversity. Because of those wild microclimates we just talked about, this region can grow everything from delicate mineral-driven whites to brooding structural reds. It's a place where ancient native vines are being rediscovered along the brilliant decade-long experiment with international varieties. We cannot talk Navarra without talking Garnacha. Historically, Garnacha was the literal backbone of Navarra. It was the workhorse. But because it's incredibly drought resistant, has sturdy wood structure, and handles blistering heat like a champion, it is known in Navarra. But right now, Navarra is in the middle of a massive Garnacha renaissance. Winemakers are heading up into the rugged hillsides of Baja Montana and tracking down forgotten ancient plots of old vine Garnacha, vines that are 80, 90, or even 100 years old. These vines produce tiny, concentrated berries with remarkably thick skins. Tempranillo is up next. Spain's signature red grape, Tempranillo finds its stronghold in Navarra's western and central subzones, particularly in Tierra Estella and Ribera Alta, which sit physically closest to the border of La Rioja. While Garnacha brings the aromatics, the high-toned red fruit, and the alcohol, Tempranillo brings the architecture. It is a grape characterized by its thicker skins, dark fruit profile. Think black cherries, blackberries, and plums. Tempranillo acts as a critical anchor. While it can make beautiful, juicy, single varietal wines on its own, It's most famous here as a blending partner. And as I've mentioned, we have the international varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. In the 1980s and 90s, when the rest of Spain was stubbornly looking inward, the DO Navarro, the council did something incredibly radical. They officially authorized plantings of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. Chardonnay is the white of the region. Chardonnay is making a quiet triumph led by winemakers who have adored it. Navarra was one of the absolute earliest adopters of Chardonnay outside of Catalonia, planting it widely in the cool limestone-rich northern subzones. Chardonnay is a grape that acts like a blank canvas for climate. Down south in the warmer zones, it turns out round, rich, and tropical, bursting with pineapple and mango notes. But up in the chalky soils of Tierra Estella and Val d'Isarbi, it is a completely different animal. The cool mountain nights keep the sugars low and lack in a bracing, vibrant acidity. We also have Vieira and Garnacha Blanca. These are the traditional white blending partners. Vieira, also known as Macabeo, and Garnacha Blanco. Vieira is the workhorse of the white grape of the northern Spain. On its own, it's simple, light, and hyper fresh, loaded with green apple and citrus notes. In Navarra, it is primarily used to bring clean, reliable acidity and lift to white blends, keeping them bright and refreshing. Garnacha Blanca is the one you really need to keep your eye on, though. It is increasingly becoming the darling of modern Navarran wines. It is textural marvel. It loves the warm Mediterranean influenced zones where it develops a medium to full body with lower acidity, but incredible weight on the palate. It tastes like ripe pears, white peaches, honeysuckle, and a little bit of herb at the finish. All right, let's get to our 3 fun facts. If you want to understand the heartbeat of this region outside of the wine glass, there are a few unique cultural threads that tie the whole identity of Navarra together. First and foremost, you cannot talk about the province without mentioning the world-famous Running of the Bulls, or El Encierro. Every year in July, during the festival of San Fermin, the streets of Pamplona explode into a sea of white clothes, red scarves, and pure unfiltered adrenaline. This intense spectacle isn't just a tourist attraction, it's a profound manifestation of the Navarrese spirit. A cultural, deeply rooted in tradition, fearlessness, and willingness to embrace high stakes intensity, which is a mindset that local winemakers carry directly into their rugged, high altitude vineyards. Secondly, that bold, independent streak makes perfect sense when you realize that Navarra was actually its own completely independent kingdom for centuries before it ever became part of a modern Spain. Straddled precariously across the Pyrenees between the massive rival crowns of Castile and France, the old kingdom of Navarre managed to fiercely defend its own unique laws, language, and deeply cosmopolitan identity. This historical autonomy is precisely why Navarra never felt the need to simply copy its neighbors or conform to rigid expectations. Finally, while the wine world celebrates the region's liquid assets, Navarra is universally legendary across Spain as the country's premier vegetable paradise. The fertile, sun-drenched plains of Ribera subzone, nourished by the Ebro River, yield some of the most highly prized culinary treasures in Europe, most notably the famous asparagus de Navarro, thick, tender white asparagus harvested by hand at dawn before the sun can touch them. When you pair these delicate nutty stalks or the region's smoky sweet piquillo peppers with a crisp local Chardonnay or a vibrant Garnacha Rosado, you quickly realize that Navarra doesn't just make wine to put on a shelf. It crafts flavors specifically designed to celebrate the honest seasonal abundance of the earth beneath your feet. So as we pack up our maps and finish that last sip in our glasses, it becomes increasingly clear that Navarra is a region that refuses to be defined by anyone else's standard. It is a spectacular landscape of crossroads where the mountains meet the river, where the Atlantic clashes with the Mediterranean, and where centuries of pilgrim footsteps have paved the way for a modern winemaking revolution. Navarra doesn't shout for your attention, and it doesn't need to imitate its neighbors. It simply endures, quietly producing some of the most dynamic, versatile, and soulful wines in all of Spain. So the next time you're browsing the aisles of your favorite wine shop, skip the predictable choices and look for Navarra. Keep your glass curious. Keep exploring and remember that the greatest joy of wine isn't about finding perfection. It's the thrill of discovery. Sláinte!
Irish coffee, banana.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt-Butt. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Kevins. Until next week, sláinte!
For a good glass of wine. A nice glass right now.